You made a comment as far as the war in Iraq may go down in history as a miscalculation or one of the worst wars we've ever gotten involved in. That being said, we're in Iraq. And how do you, what advice would you give the president, or if you were in his shoes, what would you do at this point? And the second question I had was, would you have rehabilitated Saddam Hussein's image the way that we did with Gaddafi and kind of just kept everything glued together? And I understand your point as far as the balance of the Middle East being very fragile. I'm just curious what you would do going forward at this point. We're there.
Well, going forward, I think that what has to happen is following up on the plan that's been laid out of systematically moving our forces out. There is an agreement with the Iraqis about the fact that American forces would ultimately move out, and the Iraqis, a lot of their military and police has been trained, and we are trying to work with them, and they are working themselves on developing some kind of, it goes democracy deep in terms of developing some of the institutions involved in it. I mentioned the NDI, the National Democratic Institute. We have been there in terms of trying to explain how local elections take place and how people have to participate. There are very serious issues that are still going on there. The Sunni-Shia problems, the issues with the Kurds, and I think we can help technically, but we basically have to move out. In terms of Saddam Hussein, what we were operating, first of all, Saddam Hussein was a terrible person. He did terrible things to his neighbors, and he did terrible things to his own people. The question was whether we should have invaded with ground forces. We had him, as I believe, in a box. There were very tough sanctions. We were bombing in the no-fly zones, and we knew the following thing, which was that the inspectors had actually destroyed more weapons after the Gulf War than the Gulf War itself. I think where President Bush where it went wrong was he won a huge victory in the UN when he was able to get the inspectors back in. And instead of playing that string out, the invasion happened, and I think that we would have been in better shape if the inspectors had been able to find out what was really going on. If Saddam Hussein had not cooperated, then there would have been more international support for whatever we did. I find that I think Gaddafi just screwed up royally because he was on his way to being rehabilitated for whatever reason, and his speeches at the UN made him seem like he wasn't all there. So I think that but I think ultimately it is my belief that there would have been a revulsion against Saddam Hussein of some kind. But I'm not sure that, given the unintended consequences of the war and what it did to us, whether that was the right approach. If I didn't disagree with President Clinton's sanctions, I'll talk about it in a minute, but just to make that clear. We have had a very complicated relationship with Iran for a long time. We have not had, for instance, I just was giving a speech and some Iranian American rightfully started saying, why did we, the U.S., get involved in ousting Prime Minister Mossadegh in 1953? The CIA and the British, we were responsible for removing Mossadegh for a number of different reasons and installing the Shah, and then there were very close relationships between the Shah and the United States that a lot of the people in Iran didn't like, and then you had the revolution in 1979 and the seizing of hostages, and so there has been a very bad relationship with Iran for a long time. And we each have something against them. What happened that I think is interesting, and it's something that you're pointing to, in 1998, when President Khatami was elected, and he was viewed as a reformer, we decided to see if we could test to see if there could be some kind of a different relationship with Iran. And Khatami had an interview with Christian Amanpour, and he gave a speech or interview that he respected our history and that a number of different statements that would indicate that he wanted to have a different relationship. I won't go through the whole story, but we went through kind of a diplomatic duet where I responded to him, said we respected them. We tried a number of different things, and The sanctions that you're talking about, we know very little about Iran, mainly because we haven't had relations with them. And so we thought that it might be useful to develop better signals, not only with Khatami, but with the merchant class in Iran. So we removed, all of us agreed on this together, obviously President Clinton was for this, to remove sanctions on caviar, rugs, and pistachios. Not that we needed those things, but they were associated with the merchant class, and we thought that that would help. We allowed the Iranian wrestling team to come into the United States. What happened, and this is an interesting lesson, is Khatami got less and less popular because we liked him. And so you have to be very careful if we choose somebody that we like. I think that now there is an opportunity to do two things, which is what President Obama is doing, and that is to have incentives and disincentives. Some people talk about sticks and carrots, but it is not a great image to use in Iran because that's what they use with mules. So it's better to talk about incentives and disincentives. So the incentive is that the talks have begun in these talks with the 5+1, the Security Council permanent members in Germany, with Iran in order to see whether they will allow inspections of their nuclear programs. And that looks as though it might happen with agreement that the International Atomic Energy has worked out. The other is leaving options on the table of very tough sanctions and ultimately any sanction, any option at all, including the use of force. But what President Obama is doing, and I fully agree, is to try these incentives and disincentives to give them a chance. And I believe, and it goes to a basic approach that I fully always believe in, it is better to talk to your enemies than not to. And you can do, it's talking to them allows you to deliver tough messages in addition to seeing whether there's anything you have in common.
Hello, Madam Albright. I was curious, if you were to meet with Mahmoud Ahmadinejad today, what kind of pin would you wear? And what would be the symbology behind that?
What was the last one?
What would be your symbology behind your choice of pin?
Okay. I'll tell you what I would wear. I have a pin. It's in, and then let me tell you a problem. I don't have it because my pins are mostly at the Museum of Arts and Design in New York, and I have been getting what are known now to us as pity pins for people who feel sorry for me that I don't have pins. But if I could, I have a pin in the exhibit that was designed actually by the wife of our former Secretary of Defense, Bill Cohen, and it is of a dove and an eagle together, and it goes to the response I gave in terms of trying incentives and disincentives. And I would wear a green suit in support of those that have been objecting to what happened during their elections because their color is green. So I would be a full messaging unit if I did that. Thanks.
You know, right before we came on, Secretary Albright said to me, one thing I really like is to make complicated foreign policy issues understandable. And I think you can see what a marvelous job she has done of that in this discussion today.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah.